Hello again, everybody. I am actually joining you from a really different place today. I went on a retreat, a personal. It's not even really a retreat. It's a working retreat. I'm up in the mountains of North Georgia, and I'm working on writing because you guys have been asking me to write a book for a long time. And I've listened. I actually even recently polled you here on YouTube and polled the members in my Facebook group asking you, what do you need the most from me? What do you want the most from me? And I have my several online courses um and you guys access those. But you guys have been asking me for a book about your neurodivergent relationships. And so um that is in process, you guys. And I am holed up in this beautiful Victorian B&B up in the mountains of North Georgia right now, writing away and letting the creative juices flow. So today's Q&A may be a little bit shorter because I've kind of set up shop in their little library here, and they told me I could, and it was really nice of them. But I don't want to hog the place for too long. It's really beautiful. It's an awesome place. But so I want to answer your questions though today, and I have a few that have been submitted. And there was one in particular last week that I just didn't get a chance, or 2 weeks ago, that I didn't get a chance to get to. So if you're new to this, I'm going to be doing these bi-weekly Q&As, and I've decided I'm just going to keep doing these for a while because I love connecting with you guys, and I just get a lot of feedback from folks after. So some of you can't join me live, and some of you but you go back and watch these. Hi, Rianne, good to see you again. But you go back and watch these, and I just get so much feedback that it's really helpful. So if you have a question for me today, be sure and drop it in the comments. And I'm streaming to YouTube, my YouTube channel today, and also my Facebook page and my private Facebook group. So if you're in the group, it's going to give you a little question about allowing your name or username to be seen by me. You don't have to allow that, but I just won't know who you are. I can still see your comment, but not who you are during the live stream anyway. Got my coffee here. So one of the first things I want to talk about today, on one of my other videos on YouTube, there was a comment, and I've had a conversation with this gentleman a little bit in the comments about this topic. And this was I believe it was on one of my more popular videos on how to know if someone with autism loves you. And one of the things that I talk about in that video is how individuals who are neurodivergent, autistic, neurodiverse, some people still use Asperger's. There's just a lot of terms that essentially mean the same thing. Struggle sometimes with words, I love yous, the words of affection, the actual saying, because a lot of times once it's said, it's been communicated. And to a lot of my neurodivergent folks, I've said it, you should know it. So a lot of times the actions and behaviors is what I encourage my neurotypical partners to pay attention to. And on this video, I talked about how a lot of my neurodivergent folks, if they, because their worlds are so under, they're mentally and sensory wise, there's so many demands on their systems, their neurological system, their executive functioning system. Just choosing to be in a space with you is something that means something. Just being in your space, being present with you, even if that means sitting next to you, watching TV at night, having a meal with you, doing yard work with you, that is notable for a lot of my neurodivergent folks, because that means I want to be in your space. And this gentleman in the comments said basically that's not enough. And it is true, and that's okay for him if that's not enough for him. We all have to decide what our own personal deal breakers are in a relationship. We have to decide, what do I really, really need to have and have to have in my relationship with a partner? But he went on to say that just being willing to be in my space is not enough of a way to communicate, and it's not notable enough. And he went on to say that he believes that it's very important for neurodivergent individuals to disclose at the outset of a relationship that they're neurodivergent or autistic, and that it's inauthentic or disingenuine if they don't. Well, I have a few issues with that, and I shared those with him, and I want to share them with you. First of all, there's a lot of things here. First of all, a lot of people don't even know that they're neurodivergent. They don't know that they're autistic. They don't know, so they don't know what to disclose. It's similar. They may know that they may recognize that the way they perceive the world and the things that the way they uh, go about social interactions is different than what they're seeing everybody else, and it can be very confusing to them. But so many people don't have a framework for understanding why or for understanding what that means. So it's not possible for for a lot of people, especially adults who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, who really didn't have a comprehension or understanding for neurodivergence or autism in their younger years. And even now, there are people who are in their 20s and 30s who don't realize or don't know that they're neurodivergent. So disclosing this neurodivergence at the beginning of a relationship, number one, means awareness and understanding of what that is, what that actually is. And the other part of this that I want to speak on is that in the early stages of a relationship, we're meant to be learning about each other. And it's about self-discovery. And it's not a good idea to fast forward the vulnerability aspect of a relationship. We don't, today's society especially. And so I'm speaking to some of you. If any of you here are dating, or if you're younger and you're when I say younger, I'm 50 years old. You guys, I'm an old lady. So I say younger. I'm talking to you. You know, if you're 30s, 40s, 20s, and you're dating, you're in a relationship, you're trying to be in relationships. Our society really fast forwards, or maybe you're even maybe you're 50s, 60s, and you're dating again. You're divorced, you're widowed, you're dating again. Society really tries to get us to fast forward these relationships, to get to the vulnerability, to get to the commitment, to get to the I love yous. I mean, we have TV shows, reality shows right now where they're having people get married. They're proposing. They're saying I love yous within a week. This is way too fast. So there's no we don't need to be vulnerable in that way early in a relationship. We all put our best foot forward. So, in other words, we all start off dating in a way, and I want to say neurotypicals actually. We tend to be the maskers actually more than neurodivergents. A lot of times, neurodivergents are pegged as masking, but really, we neurotypicals mask a lot, and that's actually what's really confusing to our neurodivergent folks. Comment if this resonates with you guys. We mask by our politeness and the courtship routines that we go through, the social rituals that we go through in courtship. Whereas, and so our neurodivergent folks study that because it's not inherently learned, and it's confusing. And so neurodivergent folks study that and then try to learn how to do those rituals, and then they put that mask on too, just like we do as neurotypicals. So, I mean, how many of you, when you've dated, show up to that first date really looking the way you normally look around the house? Or do you dress up? Do you look nice? Do you put your makeup on, ladies? Do you want to put your, to impress that person? That's a mask. We have dating expectations. We have these masks that we wear. And so our neurodivergent folks do the same thing. And so what we do is we start off when we first meet someone in a relationship. And if you're here and you're listening, and you've been in this relationship for years, I want you to go back in time, and you think about when you first met your partner with this new lens. And if you're doing it now, if you're in a new relationship, I want you to think about it from this lens. As you proceed with your relationship, we do have these rituals, neurotypicals do anyway, that these socially appropriate rituals that we go through that many neurodivergent folks don't understand. They don't make sense. My neurodivergent folks are the ones who typically just show up as they are. And oftentimes that prevents them from continuing to date somebody because for a neurotypical, this can be off putting. It can be hard to understand because a neurotypical is expecting more of the social politeness and the social routine. Whereas if a neurodivergent just shows up and just is just blatantly authentic that first day, let's talk about politics, let's talk about, let's just get straight to the parts of me that are raw and unfiltered. That can be difficult for a neurotypical to process. My neurodivergent folks are the ones that are going, but that seems authentic. That doesn't seem genuine. And they're right. So neurodivergents are trying to do this mask. They're trying to do these to go through the dating, the early relationship stages with these social masks on. And the thing is they aren't necessarily, and I say they, I don't mean that with any disrespect. If you followed me at all, I have very close family and friends that I love dearly who are neurodivergent. Neurodivergent folks are not really great at masking the way neurotypicals are. And so when those masks eventually start to come off and some of the filters are not there, again, to the neurotypical, it feels like, wait a minute, you know, this is not who I'm confused. It's confusion. But it's not because anybody's trying to deceive. It's because the way neurodivergent and neurotypical brains work, the way communication works, the way language works is so different. There's just a big gap in understanding each other. Rianne says in the comments from Facebook, she says, disclosing at times, and Rianne is neurodivergent. I know this because she's been around for a while. She says, disclosing at times does make things awkward. Well, I never disclosed it to anyone in a relationship until now, but I'm single and still wary of disclosing it in a relationship, as I guess they would just disappear rather quickly. And so see, that's a really valid point as well, because many people have preconceived notions about what neurodivergence means and what autism means, what it looks like, what someone's capable of when they're neurodivergent. So disclosing something like that early in a relationship is similar to disclosing other very personal things about yourself early on in a dating relationship. Some of you have struggled with things like depression, anxiety. There are lots of things. Maybe we've had a troubled childhood. There's just so many things about ourselves that are very personal that influence how we're going to show up in a relationship. And if we just showed up on that first date or early in the first month, even when we're still in the get to know me stage, and said, okay, I think you need to know I've had depression. I've been on Lexapro. I struggle with anxiety. I have panic attacks. My father abused me. My mother was an alcoholic. Let's date. Who's going to stick around for that? And so it's the same for folks who are neurodivergent. It's a very personal thing. Now, this guy in the comments, part of what he was saying is if someone is not going to be capable of emotional intimacy and emotional connection, he said, I want to know that early before I really start to invest in this person. My response to that is those are the types of things that you want to explore. And it is on each of us to explore these things about our partner. And even though it would be really great to put the responsibility on others early in the relationship and throughout the relationship, for informing us of what they're capable of, where they're at, what they can and cannot do, that basically puts all the responsibility on others for what for our own fears, for our own concerns about the relationship, when really the only person that we can really take responsibility for is ourselves. And so when we're in a relationship, it's on us to explore and investigate and be curious about that other person, to look for those signs of emotional ability to connect. Some people don't really have that kind of that insight about themselves. They don't know if they can connect emotionally. They don't know that they can't connect emotionally. And so that's not something that someone can necessarily say up front. So it's on us to explore and investigate. And then if we see those signs, then that's when we need to pay attention to what we're seeing. And that is what so many people fail to do. When we see signs, when we see things in our relationship that are concerning, when we see red flags, or when we see things that don't align with our own preferences, our own needs, our own expectations, we tend to ignore those signs or make sense of them in some way, to because we're invested at that point, or we're invested, we want to make it work, so we ignore the signs. But that's on us if we ignore the signs. Part of what I'm doing in the book that I'm writing for you guys, this is a book about the mixed neurotype relationship dynamic, because I see very specific patterns, and I've experienced and lived these patterns myself in my own relationships. And I see these patterns of where people have been in their lives, and then who they choose, and then what happens in those relationships, and then where those relationships end up. And there's this timeline that's actually there's a very notable pattern. And so in this book, I'm sharing, and you are going to see yourselves in this timeline. I know, because so many of you, as you've come to me, hundreds of you have come to me through the years, and it's just the same. It's over and over again. Now, each of you are unique in your individual experiences, and the individual traits and characteristics are different, but the pattern is the same. And I'm going to be sharing with you some of my own personal narratives and experiences, and then showing you how with the choices that I made, some of the choices that I made, and even, and this is not about bashing my ex-husband at all, not in the least, because he didn't know, that he was neurodivergent. He still doesn't know. And I don't blame the downfall of our marriage on that. We didn't have anybody to help us understand the framework. I don't there were so many other layers to who we were as human beings, and that's also part of what you're looking for when you're in a new relationship with someone, is not just one, that you're looking at all those different traits and characteristics, and what is in alignment and what's not. Okay, let me see what else. Oops. Oh dear. I didn't mean to throw that out there. Okay, so oh, that was Rianne's last comment. So Rianne said, I understand what this guy's saying, but exploring intense emotional needs, definitely one of my options, but no partner wants that closeness like I do, unfortunately. So Rianne's really struggling to really find that relationship connection, and to find somebody who really wants to be in the relationship, in a close relationship, the way she wants to. And it's definitely a struggle that so many people have. Okay, if anybody else has any thoughts or questions or comments on this, please just share them here. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next. Let's see. Let me click. I'm on my little laptop today. Normally I have all my monitors set up. And I'm sorry, I keep bumping around. I have my laptop on this little pillow in my lap. So I'm going to move on to the next question. And if any of you have any comments, just drop them here. Okay, so, all right. So one of my other, somebody else had made a comment on another post in my Facebook group, I think. And she said, what if I have become toxic over time because I'm so worn down from this relationship and I don't know if I can ever dig myself out of the hole I'm in. And, it's interesting because I remember asking my therapist, I've had my own therapist for years, and I think it's important. Fortunately, I found a therapist who she's not neurodiverse aware, and I've taught her a lot as I've discovered more and more over the years about the neurodiversity in my own marriage and my relationship. But she's been very open-minded and helped me to process things for myself as I've gone through this process, and she's wanted to learn. But I remember asking her at one point if I was narcissistic. I remember asking her if I was narcissistic or even had a borderline personality disorder, which is both of these are in the toxic category of personalities. And she told me that there was no way that I could be in one of these categories because of the compassion and empathy that I feel for my children, and even for, at the time I was still married, even for my husband, but also how much I was trying to understand about myself, all the insight that I was trying to gain. She said, "There's no way," and I understand this even more clearly now. I at the time was I had been a therapist for almost 19 years, and honestly, the training that therapists receive for understanding toxic personalities, like personality disorders, is very minimal. It's very minimal. And I had a few, well, I'd had my share as a therapist of toxic people come into my office, but these folks don't stick around, especially narcissists. They don't stick around for a variety of reasons, but that's getting off topic. Borderline personalities often do stick around for different reasons. But I didn't really understand the nature of toxic personalities enough. And I've learned so much more about it now. And this is why it's become a second expertise for me, because so many people question, just like me, question their own toxicity, and they also question whether or not their partner is a toxic personality, a narcissist, a borderline personality, or if this is neurodivergence. And the thing is, it's really, really common when people are exploring these things because of that pain that they've experienced in their relationship, the pain, the heartache, and the resentment that this person is referencing, the resentment, the contempt that actually starts to grow, the there's so much there. It's very common for people to wonder, am I now the toxic person? The thing is, we all can become very dysfunctional, and we all can develop mentalities and mindsets that are very dysfunctional for ourselves and that are harmful to others because of patterns that have been reinforced. A mixed neurotype relationship that is where two people don't understand their neurodiversity, they don't know about it, they don't understand it, and it is repeating over time the misunderstandings, and there's rehashing of conflict. This just breeds this resentment and this disconnection and this pain. And so over time, it grows, it's cumulative, it piles up. And so that pain just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But you can't become a toxic person. This is a character trait that is developed early in the late stages of personality development, in the mid to late 20s, when the window of personality development is basically closing. Our brain development is done around the mid to late 20s. And when that ability to have a regard for another human being, to actually recognize other human beings as legitimate and valid, and that they can matter as much as yourselves, when that window closes, it's closed. But when someone comes through that and has an intact ability to recognize that other people are valid. Now that doesn't mean that sometimes there's a struggle with theory of mind, which is cognitive empathy, which means sometimes we all struggle with the ability to recognize that someone else's perspective, their needs, their thoughts, their beliefs are different than ours and are legitimate. We all struggle with that, not just neurodivergent folks. We all do. My neurodivergent folks struggle with it more sometimes. Not everybody, but some do. That's one of the hallmark traits of neurodivergence, is that difficulty with recognizing the perspective of others. This is really different, though, from a toxic character flaw, character trait, personality trait. So over time, we can definitely develop resentment and negative associations with a person, but we cannot become a toxic human being. We can develop very dysfunctional patterns. And again, those patterns are very reinforced in mixed neurotype relationships that are not that don't have assistance and guidance for improvement. But toxic person, no. Now, did someone start out in that relationship as a toxic person? That's possible. And I do see that in my coaching program. There are times when a neurotypical person is the toxic partner, and there are times when a neurodivergent person is a toxic partner. Toxicity is a totally different trait from neurodiversity and neurodivergence. All right. You guys are quiet in the comments today. I see some folks are here watching across the platforms. There are people watching, but you guys are quiet. If you joined late, I'm in a B&B up in the mountains working on writing the book that's coming out for you guys next year. So what questions do you have for me today? I'm going to be cutting this short today. If you don't have questions. Hi, Casey. Casey says only because I'm completely relating to you today. Okay. Sometimes you just need to listen and process. I get that. Thanks for speaking up, Casey. You're probably not alone in that. So, okay. The other thing I wanted to say, because the second half of what this person asked was, how can I dig myself out of the resentment hole that I'm in? And so one of the things that I stress constantly is education and insight. And that's why I do these Q&As. That's why I have this channel with videos here for you. It's why I have the podcast, which season 3 is going to be actually coming out hopefully in March. I know I keep putting you guys off, but there's a plan and a method here. So, but it's why I put these free resources out for you, because it's so important for you to learn as much as you can so that you can understand what you've been living through the lens of new information. So once you have this new information about you, your partner, neurodivergence, it's important to go back and look at previous experiences in your relationship. Up until this point, a lot of you have been rehashing those experiences. And if you've taken my communication course or you've been in my workshop, one of the live workshops, you'll know that I say rehashing is very, very unproductive. Because when you rehash, you just go back and you recycle. You recycle the same complaints, the same hurts, the same responses, and it just reinforces the pain. It reinforces the disconnect, and it doesn't resolve anything. But what is productive is that when you have new information and you have new lens to understand what you each are bringing to whatever this is that you're rehashing, whatever experience it was, whatever interaction it was, what did you each bring to that? How did you bring it? What was happening for each of you? How did you understand it? What was the expectation? What were you go back and you filter it through a new lens in order to understand it. And that really has the ability for you to completely update your whole narrative about your relationship, about your partner, and your understanding the meaning that you've assigned to that experience. And then that experience influences the meaning that you have about your whole relationship. So Casey says, I've been wondering if I was narcissistic or toxic for the last 2 years. Yep. See, there's the pattern. It's the pattern. And it's often common actually for neurodivergent partners to wonder that as well. It's getting tongue tied here. It's common for both partners to wonder about the other partner. Is this narcissism? It's common for both partners to wonder it about themselves because there's so much disconnect in mixed neurotype relationships when there's not a framework for it, when there's not an understanding for why don't we understand each other, that the brain automatically searches for meaning and understanding, tries to figure it out. And if that framework hasn't been there for years, the brain fills in what it knows and what it has seen and what it has experienced. It fills in, well, maybe this or maybe that or maybe this. And toxic personalities is one of those things. I was just writing this morning, about some of my most early experiences in my marriage. I was married for 19 years, and I was going back and writing about my experiences, and I had to put myself back into who I was then as a 24-year-old when I got married, and what my perceptions were when something, as the disconnect started, which it started very early. We went to a therapist the first year of our marriage, and the disconnections started, and we had known each other. We met when we were 18, when I was 18 and he was 21. So we'd known each other for years, and it wasn't a rushed type relationship. But I went back and was remembering the experiences and the shocks I felt at times with the things that he said and did. And even I remembered seeing the confusion on his face and seeing him not understand why I was questioning something or why I was upset. And knowing that he loved me, but also being so confused by what he said that didn't feel loving, or what he did that didn't communicate what I understood to be loving. Just so much confusion. And so now, though, after all these years of learning about neurodiversity and having this framework, it's interesting to me to be able to go back, and I've done this a lot through the years, but now I'm actually putting it in writing for you guys, to go back and look at those experiences and look at them through this neurodiverse framework. And I can see it so clearly now, exactly where the disconnection was, because I was neurotypical and he was neurodivergent. And I can see exactly what happened. And it has, although, he and I are not close buddies anymore. We've got 2 wonderful children, one who is autistic, one who has lots of sensory issues. He and I are not close buddies anymore, and he's not aware. Well, I don't know if he's aware. I can't say that he is or isn't. He isn't. It came up a little bit toward the end of our marriage, and it was something he sort of acknowledged but didn't really want to talk about. So it's not a conversation we've really had, but it's not something that we're able to process together, but it's been a very healing journey for me to understand. And there's been so much grace and forgiveness that I've been able to extend to him and myself, and understanding that, that we weren't just, you know, it helped me understand why our marriage just failed after we tried and tried and tried so hard, and we really, really cared about each other, really loved each other, and it just couldn't work. But we didn't have help. We didn't have anybody who understood this or recognized it at all. And so it's what if you're here, you're here. So you have a clue now. You have some clues to your relationship. And so that's why I'm so passionate about getting all this information out to all of you to help you understand it. I teach my children, these are conversations we have on the regular, on the daily in our household, to understand, because we are a mixed neurotype family of multiple neurodivergent family members and multiple neurotypical family members who have to figure out how to translate each other, and who love each other tremendously, but get really confused with each other sometimes. Casey says, a mental health podcast I've been listening to for a couple of years, Dr. John Deloney. He isn't keen on neurodiverse, but mental health in general. He says, choose guilt over resentment every time. I can't remember who says it comes from, but I've been trying to remember that. I have years worth of resentment, and I know our relationship can't hold anymore. So instead, I let the moment go, then come back as soon as I'm calm and discuss it. Okay. Choose guilt over resentment every time. I don't know if I agree with that. Guilt is a shame emotion. It's a shame word. And guilt implies I'm wrong. I've done something wrong. And it's a very shaming word. And the misunderstandings that we're experiencing in these mixed neurotype relationships, there's no shame. I hope my microphone's not kicking up against this laptop. There's no shame, because there's no shame in not understanding what you don't know. And there's no guilt. There's no need for guilt. I have a pretty big problem with that. Resentment is also so guilt is a blame. Both of these words are blaming words. Resentment blames someone else, blames your partner. Guilt blames me. What I would replace that with is choose clarity, choose understanding over resentment and guilt, choose clarity over blame. Clarity and understanding is freedom, because when you're able to understand the why, then it's freeing, because when you understand that someone is not hurting you on purpose, they just are they're thinking about something from a totally different way. They're not meaning to harm you. Then it changes the whole narrative. It helps you to understand I am still loved. I am still cared about, just not in the way I thought it was going to be conveyed to me. And the things that are said and done sometimes are not about me, and are not about whether or not I'm loved. It's more about how my partner, my friend, my child, my parent, whoever the neurodivergent person is in your life, or the neurotypical person in your life. It's about how that person communicates they care. And it's about how I am used to receiving it. But if we do that differently, that doesn't mean that someone doesn't care. It just means we do it differently. So I say choose clarity. Don't choose guilt. Don't choose resentment. Um, those emotions happen. When you feel those emotions, that's a sign for you to pay attention to something. That's a sign for you to investigate, to be curious, and to get the clarity. But definitely don't start heaping guilt on yourself. All right. Anybody else with any thoughts or questions? Madam Curious. I have a YouTube user who just posted a comment. Hi, Jodi. Thank you so much for your invaluable help and advice. You're welcome. And her username is Madam Curious, which I love. I couldn't have planned that better because I'm sitting here saying, investigate, be curious. I love your username. And you're welcome. Thank you for your comment. So I'm gonna be back. I'm gonna go, you guys, because I'm hogging this library space here in this beautiful B&B that I'm in. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna get back to writing. I'm so excited about this book because I'm going through there's just so much in my brain that I want to get out and get into one place for you guys. It's in the videos, it's in the courses. I teach it in my coaching program, but in this book, I'm trying to put it all together, and I'm sharing a lot of my personal stories and translating my personal narratives through the neurodiverse lens to help you understand, and you're going to relate to it. I promise you're going to relate to it. But I'm also talking to you about how to spot neurodiversity and neurodivergence in yourself and in your relationship, and so many of the things that the ways it shows up in your relationship um, that you may or may not have noticed or seen, and then what to do. How do you go about repairing and mending your neurodivergent relationship? So hopefully that's going to be out for you in early 2023. And I'll be back in 2 weeks. So everybody have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all the other holidays here. I can't even, Happy Hanukkah. Um, I hope everybody has a really great holiday season. If you haven't seen it or accessed it yet, I still have my holiday stress buster toolkit for you. It's just $10. It's really helpful, you guys, to get you through the holidays. I give you 5 specific tools, talk about, repair and healing, give you 5 really specific tools to get through the holidays. So just jump on my website, jodicarlton.com. Oh, okay, before we go, Madam Curious has a question. How can I make it clear to my ASD partner that his false agreements and broken promises are destroying trust? Okay, so false agreements and broken promises. So the first thing you want to look at is you want to back up to what these false agreements and broken promises are about. Why are these being made? What's the reason? Because when anybody, ASD or not, makes promises that they don't keep, there's a reason why. There's a reason why those promises are being made to start with. And so usually when someone makes a promise or enters into an agreement that they can't keep, there is either an intent to keep that promise, there's a desire or willingness to keep that promise, but an inability to follow through. So a capacity. So it's like, yeah, I agree to this, but without the actual capacity to follow through. So you want to first look at, is the intention and the willingness actually there to follow through to is the agreement there, is the intent there, but is the capacity, is it a reasonable, is it something reasonable? So a lot of us agree to do something that when it comes down to it, we're not really able to meet a deadline, we're not able to really follow through, but we really wish we could, we really want to. So we're like, yeah, okay, I can do that. But then when it comes down to it, we really just can't. We can't deliver on it. So you want to look at why this is happening. Another reason why somebody will make a false agreement or promise is for fear of fear of the repercussions if they don't. So you also want to look at, I'm not saying that you're, some shrew that your husband is afraid of, Madam Curious. I'm assuming you're a woman. But people oftentimes will agree to something because they're really afraid of the conflict if they don't. And what happens if I don't agree to this? And so for them, in that moment, it's safer to agree, and they're more willing to deal with the consequence later, the conflict later, if they can't follow through or they don't follow through, than the consequence now. It's like delaying the consequence. So if and again, this goes back to, is this agreement something that your partner's capable of, or an agreement that your partner actually wants to make? So then the next question is, are these agreements something that your partner even really truly is an agreement? Does your partner really truly agree? Is your partner really truly agreeing to these things? Or is the agreement because he or she doesn't want to disappoint you, doesn't want to upset you, and is the agreement more to prevent conflict in that moment? Okay. Now to answer your question. So that's where you want to start anytime there is not follow through. You want to look at why. What's happening to why isn't there follow through? So but now you're saying, how do I convince him that um the trust, okay, you're saying he doesn't seem to see my point when I try to tell him how devastating it is. So he isn't hearing that you're devastated when he doesn't follow through. So for him, he's not understanding what that he's not understanding that what the follow through means to you. That tells me that he may not be buying into what the agreement actually represents to you. So if he's not devastated that he's not following through, then he's having trouble understanding that you're devastated that he's not following through. So that leads me to believe that he doesn't understand the point of the agreement, that he doesn't understand what the agreement is for, and that he's agreeing to it because of fear or avoidance of your reaction. And again, I'm not saying that you are some person to be afraid of. That's not what I'm saying. But I would start with talking about why he's agreeing to these things, and say, okay, what is it? Why are you actually agreeing to these things? And go backwards and discuss what it is that you're agreeing to, because it's more about that than his that than him. It's more about that than him breaking your trust. Even, and I'm not minimizing the devastation that you feel. It is devastating. It absolutely is devastating. But what I'm saying is the spotlight is in the wrong place. It's it's in a place that's not productive. A lot of couples, a lot of partners do exactly what you're doing, and they want to focus on how much you hurt me when you broke the trust, and that's valid. But if you really want a solution to this, you want to back up to what's happening with the agreement itself, because that's where the breakdown's happening, is in the actual agreement itself. So I would recommend backing up to that. All right. Hi. I just had someone whose username is One Love say good day. I'm rewatching. Well, we're still live, but you may be at the beginning of this, and when you get to this. Hi. Okay. Any more questions or comments? Madam Curious, did you have any response or thought to what I'm saying here? Thanks for joining me today, you guys. I'll be back again in 2 weeks, and we will be. I can't believe it's December and that Christmas is here. Ooh, wow. The holidays can be tough, you guys. Remember that a lot of time, some neurodivergent folks are nostalgic, but some are not, and so that's something that people can struggle with during the holidays. But we all are, we all have a right to our own preferences. So you do you. All right, you guys. I'm going to sign off here and give them their space back and go back to my writing. And if you have other comments, this live feed will not show up in YouTube for another 24 hours or so, maybe sooner. It takes them a while to process this live comment feed. I mean, the video will be there, but your comments in the live chat won't. But you can drop comments in the regular comment section. And then this live chat will be there probably tomorrow. All right. I will see you soon. Thanks, Rianne. I'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye.